far. So do we have any more questions from any of the examiners?
I had one small question, sorry I missed it, but maybe I can ask you. I don't see you haven't listed it in your presentation, but you use it a lot in your thesis that you were a participant observer. You talk about participant observation and it carries a certain connotation. So how are you a participant observer?
Okay. My role as a participant observer is that the fact that I've been working in the health system for like 10 years and with the same actors. So like some of the process that lead to the creation of the unit, I was sometimes the one writing the report during the meeting. So the inside discussion, I was aware about it, and I also was like, part of some of the policy discussion. But so my role as a participant of the process lead to, understand very well some of the steps, but also maybe a limitation as I could just, target some of the key persons that I think might rapidly talk to me instead of discussing with some other key person that might provide good information, but knowing them as a difficult person to approach might limit my willingness to discuss with them. So this is how I'm seeing my role as a participant observer who could, lead to easily get the data, but also introduce some bias in the data analysis and the data collection process.
Okay, fine. You kind of answered the question, but I think you need to read around again a bit, because I think in a way yes, and in a way you were not in this particular study, and you don't seem to listen. I expected actually to see it listed under your data collection, at least as a data collection method. That, but what you're acknowledging is your position, which is positionality, and you can. I don't remember reading something very strict about that in your thesis, but you're acknowledging your position in the study in terms of what you knew and what you brought to the study. And sometimes, again, it is a strength because you're an insider. And as an insider, there are things you would know that an outsider would not know. And that helps, in a way, in the interpretation of the data that you collected. So I think in that way it can be a strength, and it is a methodology that is used very much by anthropologists. But also acknowledging what, I don't know if it's bias, but your own views and values that you bring to the research process is also an acknowledgement that it is not definitely an objective process, but it is subjective, and that the lenses you're using are those of an insider. So in a way, I think it doesn't come out as strong in the thesis, but yes, you use the word participant observer, but you don't quite explain how much of a strength it is that you're actually doing research in an area that you know about it. But also acknowledging that that's the position, that's your point of departure.
So thank you very much. You can tell that with qualitative work we bring out the hidden and the hidden work. Okay. So now that the examiners are satisfied, we open it out to other members here. You're welcome to ask some questions or comments or contributions to his work. Yes?
Thank you very much for this piece of work. My question is on the African terrain. How do you see the use of knowledge translation in the policy making process, as well as the new buzzword of rapid response services? How do you see them influencing policies on our African scene? And also, how do you see the ministries of health or the health sector using this input into the decision-making process at the African level?
Yeah. I think the rapid response as a knowledge translation platform may be a useful platform to support policymaking in Africa, because it's it is someone who is going to do the work for some of the key players in the health system. As you know, some of the advocacy is to ask policymakers to use evidence to support their policy making. But again, if you look at some of the actors in the health system and the way they are so busy, it's really difficult for them to start. If you are not a researcher, it's difficult for them to find evidence, summarize it, and then apply it for a decision making. And because sometimes the way in the health system they usually interact for policy making, it's sometimes a short notice, and the people are not, oftentimes they don't have time. So if there is someone who could do the work and then give them the brief to support their policy discussion, I think that is going to be an add value and really relevant to support policy making. And then again, another issue that I could raise is the fact that sometimes in the health system, the intention is sometimes to conduct study again to address an issue, where sometimes a systematic review have been conduct to address the same problem in the same context, so they could have used those recommendations and probably contextualize them and come up with something new in the health system instead of spending money and time to reconduct another research regarding the same topic. So I think it might be an add value if some of the health system in Africa could have the same process. But again, there is a lot of difficulties that need to be addressed, because for team who have applied the rapid response services, know that it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Okay.
Hello, once again. Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, of what importance is this beautiful work to the layman, to the community out there, to what's the relevance of maybe my grandmother out there in the village who doesn't know anything about this, and the importance of excuse me, maybe getting them engaged with something, I don't know, what's the relevance back down to the layman, to the people who did not understand it.
Yeah, okay, so to answer your question, I would probably talk about the contribution to, in some aspect, for example, regarding the methodology or the contribution to the field. As I mentioned, work around unit institutionalization are few. And if you look at the literature review, there is not, you can't find a lot of publication around unit institutionalization. So for me, a framework a combination framework that we've used here, for example, could be something for the community to use it, and not even for unit institutionalization, but even any kind of activities, institutionalization that they would like to, apply in any system somewhere. There is different steps that need to be followed, because if you look at the financial-based, performance-based financing process, that the way they used to implement it in countries, they usually pilot it, scale it, and then further make sure that it will get financial support from the government. So this is the same kind of process that could be used, but then we combine it with a framework that has been developed by the World Bank, regarding the framework, availability, the production of the relevant report, and then the resources availability to support the process. So I think this kind of framework could be something useful for the community.
Okay. I think audience is satisfied. Thank you. Oh yes, sure. Why not?
Yeah. So, thank you very much for the presentation. I enjoyed it very much. As Ruth mentioned, donors. And you know that this has been a fascination as we discussed it. One thing one tries to understand is, why do you think some donors and other policy makers who agreed to talk to you, but then said, don't use this in your report? So what do you think was the motivation that they should talk to you, and yet you very well that you shouldn't use this? In other words, what benefit do you think they were envisaging that would accrue from talking to you, even though you are not going to document this and use it in your work? That's the first one. Second is on the implications for future research. You told us about implications for policy and practice. How about implications for future research? And lastly, again, transformation around you, maybe related to the work, to the question of the examiner, that how have you matured? Let me ask, how have you been transformed in the process of doing this PhD work, which has been qualitative? How have you been transformed, if at all? And the work that you've been doing in the last 1 year, which has taken you to many different countries, how has the PhD work made that work different in approach from the way that you used to approach?
Okay, I will start by the last difficult question. I think the transformation is in different way in terms of being able, for example, to work in Anglophone countries and Francophone countries is something that I could not achieve without this PhD program, and that's one of the hard value and achievement that I could highlight here. Then, in terms of health policy analysis, before I started this program, I didn't know anything about the word health policy. It's not, to me, to be honest, when I started the process, I was like, okay, if I have a degree in health policy, how am I going to sell this? How is it going to be important for me to get a new job with the word health policy? Then when you start doing the work, you realize that there is a lot of demand on this particular area, because they don't have a lot of, I would say it's a growing domain. It's a growing domain, especially for the knowledge translation aspect. And sometimes when, having a degree on especially health policy analysis, it's something for us that we could really sell and combine it with our background on health finance aspects. So now, in terms of transformation, when I'm, showing my data, presenting my data to, for the health finance, usually one of the key questions that I'm asking is how this could be used for policy making in the country. You know, before this program, I was just building my numbers and present it in the report. But now, you know, I'm really careful on what are the key information that could be used for policy making. Now I'm aware that everything that I produce will not be relevant for the policymakers, or at some level, some aspect might be, you know, relevant by different level of policy making process. Some key indicators might be important for some of the high level policymakers. Maybe the methodology on how we build the data could be important for some technical workers in the health system, and so on. So the transformation came through this kind of aspect, and there is a policy brief, recent policy brief that I produced for Burkina on maternal and child health. And if you had a chance to look at this, read this policy brief, you will see the way I use the national health account and combine it with the health policy analysis to come up with a kind of recommendation for the policymakers. And it is something that many donors are using and even discussing with me. I did the same thing for Benin. So for your second question regarding the application for future research, as I said, you know, we conducted a study with 2 case studies, for example, for the policy units, the factors that usually affect unit institutionalization. And we think that some area that might need to be explored could be like increasing the numbers of units to try to analyze the process. The second thing might be using the overall kingdom framework instead of keeping the agenda setting part of the framework. It could probably bring hard value if we start from the agenda setting up to the evaluation and the implementation. So for the rapid response unit institutionalization, we look at the unit itself institutionalization. But now, probably for future research, someone might look at, analyze the unit impact in the health system, how it has changed policymakers, you know, the way they are usually conducting policy making in the health system. For your first question regarding why some policymakers were willing to discuss with me and then at the end refusing us to use the data, I think this is something that I was highlighting as a participant or observer, but I think the remark that has been said is probably my position in the health system that lead to this kind of aspect. Because being part of the some of the policy making process and also working with them every day, it's easy for them to easily talk to you. And I believe someone else discussing with them will not get the same information. So it's like you ask a question for your interview, but it's like you know, a dialogue that we are conducting now, because they will keep talking and providing some additional information that you even didn't ask. But that is because, you know, there is a kind of familiarity between us, and it's easy for them to tell me later to not transcribe all of them, because if I transcribe it and produce it in the report, they will get back to me because they know how to find me.
Okay. Maybe I can ask like 1, 2 questions, general questions. One, right from the title of your thesis, you talk about institutionalization. And this is something that is applicable to all, especially in Africa, and it may be different in whichever country you're working in. For example, if you say, you told us that if there is a document about something, it is institutionalized. If there is a budget, so it may be a spectrum. So for a particular work, what did you consider to be institutionalization? Because at some point you say some things were partially, some were fully. How is this defined in the spectrum of your work?
I think for us, yes, so I forgot to contextualize the definition that we are using here for the unit institutionalization. For us, the definition that we are giving to the unit institutionalization, it has to be something that will remain in the health system after the support of the European Union funding. So for us, if the unit remain and continue to provide the same service after the European Union, the donors funds, for us it's a step forward for the institutionalization. And looking at the way it has been transformed in the health system right now, for us this is the kind of recommendation that we, key aspect that we are highlighting in the study, that government has to take the ownership of the units. Government has to provide a state budget line, and human resources that will be 100% committed to this particular work and not do something else. Because if they have workers who really work on the unit and then keep doing something else in the system, it's not going to work. So for us, it's the definition that we are giving to the institutionalization. It's the unit being available in the system after the European Union supports.
The other is a simple question in terms of implementing or having this work disseminated. Are you going to translate it into French for your country to use? Or how are you going to do that?
Yeah, I think yesterday when I was reading my book, I was expecting this kind of question, because I mentioned that we're going to probably translate some of the brief and disseminate the work to some of the policymakers in the system. But we had an opportunity to present a PowerPoint with some policymakers in the health system, but we did not yet translate any paper into French, because it's really time consuming, and so we thought keeping the PowerPoint presentation might be useful for them, and even instead of translating even the abstract might not be useful, but having a policy, like a policy dialogue whereby I present the results and then we start the communication might be useful for them. But also I was happy to see that when they started to implement the new units, they used one of the paper, although it was in English, some of the steps was, they were able to, use some of the key information to start the new unit implementation. So probably I might thinking of, presenting it during a policy meeting, or see if we could translate only the three abstracts for the policymakers.
Thank you. Please join me to thank Zida for the presentation.